Welcome back to the video series in which I share with you guys every single movie I watched over the past year. This is part 2 in that series. It is going to be a 12-part series. If you missed part 1, definitely check it out where I talked about every film that I watched in January, but we are now moving on to February. I will be rating these films with the Letterboxd ratings, so if you follow me and notice that I normally do out of 10 ratings, I'm doing Letterboxd because that's how I kept the diary of everything that I watch, and it's just a little bit easier. You can kind of convert it mentally in your head. If I rate it a 3 out of 5, then that is a 6 out of 10. So with that said, let's jump into February. The very first film I watched in February was The Host from the year 2006. Now, The Host was a Bong Joon-ho film, and he is a very notable director over the past year or so, winning an Oscar for the film Parasite. And we decided to shed some light on his horror roots by doing a director's spotlight episode on 22 Shots featuring Godzilla as a guest, and we covered The Host and 2 other films which I'll get to. The Host was the first one that I watched out of them. I've never seen it before. It's pretty fun. It's basically a kaiju film. There's a good blend of comedy in it as well. The CGI is not the best, but there are some practicals too. It was a pretty good effort from Bong Joon-ho. I gave it a 3.5 out of 5. Then continuing along with the 1985 prep for the podcast that I had coming up, I watched Dario Argento's Phenomena, which is one of my favorite Argentos. I would probably say top 5, maybe right at the 5 spot. And it's pretty awesome. You have Jennifer Connelly in it. There's this weird psychic kinetic ability with bugs. Donald Pleasance in there has a really creepy ending. It's a pretty solid giallo-esque Italian horror film, and I give that one a 4 out of 5. Then I was fortunate enough to see a film in the theater, a retro film that came out in the year 1981. It was My Bloody Valentine, which I couldn't be more excited to see that in the theater. Unfortunately, they showed the R-rated version and not the uncut version. The uncut version almost like completely makes that film go up by a point or 2. It's absolutely such a great addition with the gore to see that movie in, but it was still pretty awesome to see that film in the theater on the big screen. I never really thought I would have a chance to do that, so I was very fortunate that my theater played that as part of their classic movie night, which you don't expect. They normally play, you know, very mainstream and popular movies, not an 80s slasher from Canada. So I really appreciate that. Really solid movie. I gave it a 4 out of 5. Then I watched a super old horror film called Dante's Inferno from the year 1911. I mean, this is an ancient film, and it kind of blew me away a little bit. It's basically a hell story, you know, of Dante's Inferno, the 7 circles of hell. It's very creepy. The imagery is kind of insane for the time that it came out. Very cool watch. Definitely an experience. I highly recommend you check out Dante's Inferno if you would like to see some historical horror. I gave that a 3.5 out of 5. Then I revisited Wesley Craven's The Hills Have Eyes Part 2, which I got in a cool Arrow edition. Haven't seen this film in years. I've always considered it one of Wes's worst films. Watching it this time, I kind of liked it. It's essentially Wes Craven's answer to a Friday the 13th film, sort of the slashers of the time. It's sort of Wes Craven's response to what was going on at the time, and I know that he didn't really want to make the film, but he kind of did it for a paycheck. It's honestly not as bad as I remembered. I kind of enjoyed it. I gave it a 3 out of 5. Then continuing along with the Bong Joon-ho prep for 22 Shots, we have Memories of Murder from the year 2003. This movie's kind of fantastic. It's a little bit of a slow burn mystery film where you're fed information a little slowly, but it's a really good movie, and I gave it a 4 out of 5, but thinking back on it, I probably should have been a little higher. And the third Bong Joon-ho film that we watched was Mother from the year 2009. It's a pretty decent movie as well, and I gave that one a 4 out of 5. Then I was still working my way through the Amityville box set, which I was going through in January, that Vinegar Syndrome put out, and I watched Amityville like 5, A New Generation, which is from 1993. This is the one that I don't really remember. See, last video when I was editing it, I remembered that, oh, Amityville The Evil Escapes is Amityville 4. Of course, that one's awesome. It's with the kid and the chainsaw. Amityville 5 is The New Generation. That's the one with the mirror. I get them all confused. But this one was, again, fun. It's probably the least good out of the 4 Amityville sequels that came after Amityville 3, but I gave it a 3 out of 5. Then I watched We from the year 2018. This is a Belgium film that is in the vein of a Kids or another Larry Clark movie. It's very similar to that, sort of like this messed up youth film. I really enjoyed it. There's actually a Blu-ray put out by Artsploitation Films that is uncut, and there's actually some hardcore sex scenes in it with actual penetration and stuff. That's definitely a little bit more of the shocking version that you can check out, but I thought it was pretty good. I gave it a 3.5 out of 5. Then I watched DEFCON 4 from the year 1985. This is sort of a post-apocalyptic film. Starts off pretty good, but goes downhill. It's, I think, a Canadian TV film. Not a huge fan of it. It was okay. I gave it a 3 out of 5. Then I watched Jeremy Gardner's newest effort, the guy who made The Battery and Tex Montana Will Survive. It is called After Midnight. It came out in 2019 in the festival circuit and got a lot of praise. I was looking forward to it to finally get released in 2020, and I was very disappointed. It was not the film that I was hoping for. I was a huge fan of The Battery, and this film is very simplistic like The Battery, and it does seem to have heart, but unfortunately the story just doesn't really grab me, and I found it kind of boring, and maybe it felt a little kind of full of itself. Maybe not. I don't know. It was very disappointing. It was on my top 5 most anticipated 2020 films, and it ended up being on my top 5 most disappointing 2020 films after watching it. I give it a 2.5 out of 5. Because I watched that film, I decided to watch Tex Montana Will Survive from the year 2015, and I thought this was great. This is a fantastic Jeremy Gardner film. I absolutely love it. The guy clearly watched tons of like Survivor Man and other type of survival shows to kind of get an idea of what to do here. Great performance by Jeremy Gardner, super funny, much better than After Midnight. I gave it a 4 out of 5. Then I checked out Takashi Miike's First Love from the year 2019, getting its wide release in 2020. I had a Blu-ray of this. It was pretty decent. Mix of tons of genres and stuff in there. Takashi Miike is always fun. I gave that a 3.5 out of 5. Then we have Spring from the year 2014. This is a film that I watched on Valentine's Day. It was a Valentine's Day double feature that me and Carly did. I picked Spring because it is sort of a love story with Lovecraftian elements, and it's really good. I hadn't seen it since it came out, and I really wanted to revisit it, and it definitely held up. I love the story. I love the romance aspect to it, which is really hard to pull off in horror sometimes, so I thought it was a pretty damn good movie, and I gave it a 4 out of 5. The second film in that double feature was Return of the Living Dead Part 3 from the year 1993. This is the third in the original Return of the Living Dead trilogy, and I had always liked this one the least, but over the years it's become one of my favorite zombie films, and it's partially because of the performances as well as the romantic angle in the film. The redheaded lead in this film is smoking hot. I absolutely love her. Got this whole goth thing going on, and especially after she starts to turn into a zombie and stuff like that. I just think that the movie is really enjoyable. It's pretty low budget looking at times, but I think it adds to its charm a little bit. Big fan of that one. I also gave that a 4 out of 5. Then back to the theater for Fantasy Island 2020. This movie was okay. There's not a ton of horror elements involved in it. I thought it was okay at best, nothing special. I gave that a 3 out of 5. Then we have Igor and the Lunatics from the year 1985. This was a Trauma release. I remember it having some like gore with a saw, and that's kind of about all I remember. I gave it a 2 out of 5. Then we have Once Bitten from the year 1985, starring Jim Carrey. This is sort of another romantic film. It has vampires, figures once bitten, and it's pretty much a comedy. It was enjoyable. I gave it a 3.5 out of 5. After that, Howling 2, Your Sister's a Werewolf from the year 1985. I honestly don't really care for this movie. I don't really care for the Howling series in general. There's really not that many good films in the Howling series. I think the original is definitely the best, and then everything else is kind of not so good. I don't think it's a horrible movie, I just don't really care for it that much. So in terms of a rating in a critical way, I gave it a 3 out of 5, but personally I don't enjoy it that much. Then we have Parasite from the year 2019. This is Bong Joon-ho once again, and yeah, this film was really good. It was the Best Picture winner last year. And we actually went to see a screening of The Lodge, and they had an issue with the film, the hard drive that the film was on, so they offered us to see anything else we wanted, and the one that seemed interesting and that was on my list anyway was Parasite, so we went and seen that. And yeah, it's a really good movie. Definitely happy to see it get all the love that it got. I gave that a 4 out of 5. After that, we have The Doctor and the Devils from the year 1985. As you can tell, I've mentioned this, but watching a lot of 1985 movies for prep for our top 10 of 1985 podcast that we did over on 22 Shots. So if you want to check that out, definitely do so. It's released a while ago now, but it's a really great episode. We have The Doctor and the Devils. This is a Burke and Hare story, and I absolutely love it. I think the set is great. The time period piece works really well. Just a very enjoyable movie. I've seen it twice, and I loved it both times. I gave it a 4 out of 5. Then I finally did manage to see the theatrical release of The Lodge, and it was a really good movie. There was a scene in there right at the beginning that really shocked me and kind of made me jump. I wasn't expecting it. The story is pretty engaging and interesting. It's definitely one of my favorites of the past year. I gave it a 4 out of 5. That same day, I went and seen Brahms the Boy 2, and I can just tell you right now, The Lodge was the much stronger film. I really was kind of bored with The Boy 2. It really wasn't too impressive. I really liked the original Boy, but I didn't really remember it, so I was kind of having trouble remembering the first film and the connection between the two, so it was not the most enjoyable experience. I didn't hate the movie, but I didn't think it was very good either. But I gave it a 3 out of 5. Then I finally got around to seeing Terminator Dark Fate, which I was really excited to finally check out. And I watched it, and honestly, I didn't really love it that much. I was surprised considering so many people that love, Terminator 1 and 2 were saying that this is like the true sequel, and to me, it just didn't really work. The action sequences weren't overly that great, and I really didn't care for the story that much. It was a huge letdown. I actually liked Terminator Genesis a little bit more. I gave it a 3 out of 5 still. Then I started prepping for the Scream show on 22 Shots featuring Lacey Liu, and I watched Scream from the year 1996, and this is an absolute classic, one of my all-time favorite horror films ever, definitely in my top 10. Absolutely love it. It works so well for me. It's kind of one of those films I could watch over and over and over again and never really get tired. I love the characters, and I love the series, so I gave it a 5 out of 5. Then I went to this theater and I watched The Call of the Wild from 2020. I believe this was a Disney film. It started off pretty decent, but by the end, I really didn't like it. I thought it was kind of bad, actually. Maybe not bad, but definitely not good. It definitely had its problems. I was actually really disappointed in it, and I gave that a 2 out of 5. Then I watched Scream 2 from the year 1997, and this is a pretty solid sequel. I think that, it definitely adds to the Scream mythos. It's nowhere near as good as the first film, but it's a pretty solid slasher. I gave that a 4 out of 5. Then I watched Scream 3 from the year 2000. It's definitely the weakest in the Scream series for me, but I still think it's definitely a solid slasher film. I think if you hold it next to Scream 2 and 1, it's definitely not as good, but if you take it as just another slasher film and don't try to compare it to the first two, it's still pretty fun and pretty decent. I gave it a 3.5 out of 5. We have Scream 4 from the year 2011. Scream 4 is my second favorite Scream film. I think that the new characters they introduced were great, as well as seeing a reunion of the OGs was just awesome. Some people have a problem with the way it ends. I do not. That's the way I wanted it to end because everybody was expecting something else. I also like the disses and sort of snubs they do towards remakes and that whole concept of don't mess with the original. Absolutely love it. I give Scream 4 a 4 out of 5. And then I was very fortunate to see a theatrical screening of the 1933 film The Invisible Man, which was in promotion for the reboot or remake of The Invisible Man from Leigh Whannell that was coming out. So this was really cool to see on the big screen. The Invisible Man is my favorite Universal monster film, just above Frankenstein and Creature from the Black Lagoon and the Wolfman. I mean, I really do love them all, but Invisible Man always has been my favorite. It has this great villain, and it reminds me a little bit of Freddy Krueger. I like that about him. He's scary. It's kind of maniacal. Really good, awesome movie. Great to see it on the big screen. An absolute classic. I give that a 5 out of 5. Then the very next day, I was able to go see The Invisible Man 2020, the new Leigh Whannell flick. And I really loved it. There's this great angle with the domestic abuse that's going on with the lead character and sort of the invisible nature of how some victims of domestic abuse feel. And that was a really cool allegory. I really enjoyed this movie. I thought it was pretty damn good and one of the favorite watches of the year for me. I gave it a 4 out of 5. Then we have Scream: The Inside Story from the year 2011. I believe this was made to sort of promote or to coincide with the release of Scream 4. I remember seeing it when it came out. It's a documentary. It does a good job of sort of explaining the behind the scenes and stuff like that. It's pretty good. I gave it a 3.5 out of 5. Then I checked out Color Out of Space on 4K. This is the new H.P. Lovecraft film adaptation starring Nicolas Cage. Tommy Chong's also in there. I gotta admit, I really love the colors and the look of the film, but I really didn't love it like other people were loving it. It was good, but it didn't really blow me away or anything. It's probably one I need to rewatch because I barely remember it, but yeah, it didn't really impress me or anything. I gave it a 3.5 out of 5. And then finally for February, I watched Amityville Dollhouse from the year 1996, which was the last Amityville film in the box set that came out from Vinegar Syndrome, so I polished that off. And yeah, this one's probably one of my favorite of the sequels after part 2. There's like this incestuous angle there with the stepmom that I think is pretty cool. It's a pretty solid Amityville film. I really dig it, and I gave that one a 3.5 out of 5. So I hope you guys enjoyed every film that I watched in February. Be sure to check out the March video that will be coming soon. Thank you guys for watching. Any podcasts or episodes that I mentioned, check them out. Thank you. Definitely leave me a comment. tell me what you thought about my thoughts on the films that I talked about. So with that said, see you guys next time. Peace out. The very first film I watched in February was The Host from the year 2006. Now, The Host is a what is this fuck is his name? Now, The Host is a Bong. Now, The Host is a Bong Joon. I don't know why that's so funny. Bong. You know, rip a bong. Bong Joon-ho. Okay.